My BMW 135 started out as a dead car. It had blown turbos, it smoked, it wasn't running properly. It was pretty well destined to be a parts car or scrapped. Instead of doing the smart thing, I decided to rebuild it from the ground up. The goal was simple: build what I consider the ultimate N54 with about 700 horsepower. Not only did I want it to be fast, but I also wanted it to be reliable. I wanted to be able to take it on road trips and not worry too much about if it's going to break down or cause any grief along the way. Every part of this build was its own video when it happened. The wins, the losses, mistakes, and everything in between. This video is the full build, start to finish, all in one place. So grab a drink, grab a snack. This one's gonna be a long one. This here is my 2009 135i M Sport. So this one here has 144,000 kilometers. Again, if you didn't watch the previous video, it decided it wanted to eat a bit in the turbo. And somebody had driven it a little bit, ground down the turbo, bunch of metal went throughout the engine, and when we looked at the oil filter housing, there was a bunch of brass material. This motor is considered a bit of a boat anchor, couldn't be trusted. My friend wanted it said and done, gone, everything, so I accidentally bought it. I think I decided at 2 a.m., so I shouldn't be left unsupervised with my wallet, I guess. Along with the BMW, this one's actually kind of neat because it has full CIC iDrive, it has backup camera, PDC sensors, it's full load, so full M Sport. Nice thing about this one as well is it has the really big M Sport brakes. Along with that, we have a good N54 that's hiding under all these mattings. So this N54 ironically has within 1,000 kilometers of the one that's coming out, and this was from BC. So for those of you that may not know the significance of that, it didn't have actual cold starts on it. So BC, even if you leave the vehicle outside, it doesn't get anywhere near as brutal cold as good old Alberta. So this has very minimal cold starts. It's gonna have very little wear. I took a peek in the oil filter housing. There's no stripper glitter, which is really nice. Along with that, we're gonna put it on an engine stand. I'm gonna pull the pan off, make sure there's no surprises. I bought a bunch of things to reseal it. So I guess, I don't know if we're gonna call this a significant mod, but we're changing the engine. Along with changing the engine, I guess one of the major upgrades will be, this here has an 8 HP 21, I believe. So they were good transmissions, but for whatever reason, I think a little over a year ago, I decided to buy an 8 HP 45 out of 228i. So I had one of those laying around conveniently that I got for dirt cheap before everybody jumped on the bandwagon. So an 8 HP 45 is going to go into this vehicle. Along with that, it's going to be using a CanTCU controller. So I'll be able to use that with the E82 chassis in this 135. Along with that, we have a big single jingle that we're going to be putting on here. So everything that's on this engine is kind of redundant at this point. Everything is seeing a bunch of metal. So I would consider that pretty catastrophic. We're gonna ditch everything that this had. We're gonna go with a big single. We're gonna aim to make roughly around 700 horsepower. Now, that being said, between the single 6466 turbo, so it's gonna have a billet wheel with dual ceramic ball bearing. So it's gonna respond good, it's gonna spool really well, and it's going to be a really nice match for the gearing of the 8 HP. It's going to be run on a JB4 with a back end flash for the interim, and it's probably going to get a custom tune done by either David Shoup or Doc Vu. So I guess what we're getting at is I'm going to try and build what I guess I would dub the ultimate N54. So trying not to be all clickbaity and stuff, but the list is going to be right over here. So we're going to have a decent build. I don't want it to just accelerate and that be its main function. I want it to turn well. I want it to brake well. So eventually the big brakes will be upgraded, probably pad stainless lines, and who knows, maybe I'll get an H&R Cup kit or something with sway bars. But it's going to perform really well from every aspect. It won't just accelerate quick. It'll also brake, it'll take a corner quick, and really the 135 and being predominantly, well, they all came rear wheel drive. I think this is going to be a very good platform to make a very well-rounded performing vehicle. I had a number in mind, and I think that's where you could end up shooting yourself in the foot. I'd like for it to make about 700 horsepower. And realistically, vehicle included, if we can do that for, let's say, 10,000 US, because our Canadian pesos don't go far at all, we may as well just light cigars with those and kind of go from there. But for having a 700 horsepower vehicle for under 10,000 US, I think that's a pretty good goal. And I think that's something to be a little bit excited about. So it's going to be a very good platform, and I am very excited to get started on this thing. So first things first, I guess we'll put the motor on the stand, or the chicken rotisserie, I think as the gentleman calls it, and give it a quick health check, and pass the health check, start modding. If you haven't watched the first video, we got a replacement engine for the one that's currently in the 135i. Now the one that's in the 1 series is a 6-bolt engine, and this here is an 8-bolt. So it's out of a 07, I believe, 335. Before we install it, we just want to make sure that everything is right and doesn't have any issues. So we're going to start with a health check and go from there.
Ooh. Ooh. Crispy gasket.
Okay.
There's a bit of oil left in there for you.
Where's that pen light that you stole? You don't have it, do you?
Yeah, I do. 1 sec.
There's some not so great looking stuff in here. Look at all that gold!
Oh, shut up.
Gold oil. So good thing is this stuff, that had me a little sketched out, but it's all just casting from the aluminum. So that makes me feel a little bit better. I'm gonna assume it's good. It looks fine. Oh, that made more of a mess than I wanted. Ooh, look at that chunk. What the f is that? See that big
Where?
This. There's more. There's a bunch of all over. That's not good. So I don't know if it's gonna show up. Let's see, maybe. So we've got little plastic pieces. We're not sure what it's from. This is like something you should never see in here. Like here's another big piece. I'm gonna show you kind of what we found and my thoughts on what I'm gonna do. So for obvious reasons, this is never a good idea to find a bunch of this garbage in your oil pan. There's a lot of, I don't know how to really describe it, tiny little plastic pieces. There are some larger ones, this one here. They have somewhat of an impression on them, like a design. So initially I'm thinking it may be from the timing chain, at least one of the guides. I took a flashlight, I took a peek inside the oil pan just for the time cover and everything, the guides, and I couldn't really see anything. So what I think I'm gonna do is continue to tear down the motor, pull the valve cover off, see if there's anything evident, and go from there. The little pieces kind of look like they line up with the webbing on valve cover, but I'm not sure. They're all crushed in tiny little pieces now, so obviously at some point it's made its way through the chain and crushed it up. Now I'm left dealing with it. So I'll put it on time lapse. I'm gonna start tearing down the motor, and I guess we'll go from there. So we're gonna start by tearing down this engine, at least from the top end. So I'm gonna remove all the fuel lines, I'm gonna remove the harness, and I'm gonna get things out of my way. So from there, we're gonna have easier access to actually remove the valve cover. And of course, the ultimate goal is to actually replace the seal to make sure everything is nice and leak proof. Yeah, we'll go with leak proof. Once I end up putting all of the fuel lines on the bench, I label them cylinders 1 to 6 just to ensure that they go back in the same place. And of course, just make sure that you don't put any dirt and tape off the ends. Of course, I just put a couple microfibers over top just to ensure there's no contamination. Oh, that's what you want to find in your valve cover. So as you can see, the engine inside is actually quite clean. Like this is all nice silver. This still has a little bit of its red color to it. Like there's no excessive staining or anything on the cam gears, on the bolts. Usually you'd see a bit of a variance between the two pieces of metal where the gasket was and where it wasn't. So for injectors, we have index 4, what is that? Index 9, 8, I think. 4 and 3. So for obvious reasons, you can't really see inside the timing cover. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a micrometer or caliper to the vanes on here. I don't know if there's enough light to show you. There's a bit of vanes on here. I want to measure one of those and measure the thickest piece that I have over there. And I don't know, I guess see if it's remotely close. I need to try and figure out where that plastic came from. The valve cover is fine. The webbing isn't damaged or anything, even though I think it might be aftermarket. So here, I'll actually show you. So the valve cover itself is actually quite clean. Of course, you can see in here, this is what I was thinking that the pieces would be from, is plastic webbing. Of course, I'm going to measure those and I'm going to see if maybe it was from a valve cover job, but this one here, it doesn't have the yellow sticker on the backside there where a factory BMW one would. So does that point me in the right direction? I have no idea. But if I'm going to be comfortable running the engine, I need to know where the plastic came from. So whether it's from the timing components or the old valve cover. So I'm going to go with a caliper, see what I can figure out and go from there, I guess. 2.3 mil. And if you can see, if I put a caliper on this one, it is 1.45. That's not a match. Like there's nothing obvious up here, and I've measured everything I could. Like there's no damage to the chain or to the guides up here, and this is an orangey red one, so I mean that's not it. The only thing that I did measure that was remotely close was the inner ribs of the valve cover. So inside of here there's this inner rib. Now this inner rib measured within 2/200ths of the piece that we had found, which is kind of interesting. So Taylor ended up bringing his scope by. So we're going to end up taking the valve cover off a second time. And because the scope has a light and a camera, we're going to poke around the guides just to ensure there's no pieces missing. Yikes. Maybe I should show the camera what garbage we're looking at. That's like not even 480p. It's like 240p. This isn't gonna do anything. Oh, see that? Mm-hmm. I can kind of see it right here, right there.
That looks good to me though.
Yeah, it might be.
Yeah, it's even on both sides. That's a good shot right there, actually. See how the lines follow identical on both?
Okay. Test inconclusive. Which probably isn't anything good. I guess it's also not bad. So of course, with my luck, using the scope didn't result in much information. So saw nothing from the top, nothing from the bottom. So I started to feel a little bit more comfortable that it wasn't actually from the guides, but just a little bit. So I figured, well, worst case, we're gonna have to pull the turbos off to do the rest of the health check and just to check the health of the actual valve stem seals. So we're gonna rip off the turbos, charge pipe, all the lines, see how much they're gonna fight with us, and then try and wrap up this health check and see what this engine is like. Fortunately, when we did drop the oil pan, everything looked extremely clean. I didn't notice any bearing material, no stripper glitter, nothing like that. So I started to feel slightly better the more I started to take this apart. Well, we'll see what the turbos hide in behind it, and if my luck is any indication, who knows what's going to be in between the turbos and the exhaust valve stem seals. So we were kind of looking at all the valves. I don't know if this is going to show you properly. You can see this one's sort of starting to sweat a bit. This one is similar. This one looks kind of all right. There's just the tiniest little residue on the valve. This one is all right. This one is all right. Let's jump to 6. That's okay. That's okay. 5, looking all right. 4. Oh, hey, what's going on here? So you can see the tip of the valve right where it meets the valve guide is a little bit different. So that means it's starting to get a little bit of oil past the valve seal. And this one, well, that's not good. So I'm gonna try and zoom in as best I can. So this one, that's not good. You can see where the valve stem seal is actually leaking and there's residue right up top there, kind of where the flashlight's pointing. And you can see where it's coming down the valve stem and burning in the exhaust. So the biggest indication is you can see where it's still wet on top of the exhaust housing there, right where the valve stem is. So that's not great. It's really not good to see, especially with a relatively clean motor. You don't want to see stuff like that to happen, along with the plastic in the oil pan. And now confirmed, that's pretty bad. Like that's a very, very bad leaking valve stem seal. And if you run it, that'll likely cause smoke. So you don't really want to run it. So I'm not sure what we're gonna do now. I don't know if we're gonna have to refresh the head, put new valve stem seals in, which is a big job. Yeah, I'm not sure. So I'm gonna try and figure it out and I'll let you know. So what we have here is the N54 that's going in my 135i project. If you watched the last video, you would have seen that this has a few issues, a few question marks, and a few concerns. We ended up finding some plastic material in the bottom of the oil pan. Of course, we ended up scoping the entire engine, couldn't really locate where it was coming from. It was either, my best guess would be the previous valve cover gasket, the previous valve cover, as this one is not the OEM one, or maybe something worse like a timing guide. Past that, we pulled the turbos off and with my fantastic luck, found that the valve stem seal on cylinder 4 is sweating a little bit. I won't say leaking, it's sweating. You can see some staining. It's polished the valve, but it could be worse. So my thought process is try to ignore it. Don't poke the bear, don't open it, don't rip it apart, don't do the valve seals, because I feel like it's gonna be a can of worms. If I end up digging into there, it's gonna be a few months project and probably way, way over budget at that point. So I'm going to leave the head alone. That being said, we're gonna start by removing everything else off this engine. We're gonna pull all the hoses off, all the AC, anything that doesn't need to be on right this moment. I'm gonna clean down the entire side of the block, so both sides, front, the rear's clean, that's whatever. A little attention to detail, of course, when we go to throw it into the vehicle, it's gonna get dirty anyways, so I'm not gonna go too crazy with it. We're going to reseal the oil pan, so I have a new gasket and bolts for that. We're gonna reseal the valve cover. Other than that, we're gonna pull the intake manifold. We're gonna see what the carbon buildup looks like, and at that point, I'll do a ghetto cleaning or look for a walnut blaster like everybody keeps telling me to look for one. So we'll get started. We're gonna rip all the stuff off and go from there. So oil cooler, we're gonna get an auxiliary oil cooler for this. So we're gonna take off these lines soon enough. Let's start with this coolant line where the Mickey Mouse flange is. There shouldn't be any coolant in the engine, and it looks like the scrapyard cut this one off. So let's start with that one. Oh, damn it. Okay, that actually came out all right. And because I hoard everything, I'm gonna save this one in case I ever need to do a silicone hose upgrade. Take a peek at the thermostat. Yeah, it looks okay. I don't know if it's been changed recently. So we're gonna take this all the way off to the Mickey Mouse flange. We're gonna change the Mickey Mouse flange. So maybe it's a little preemptive, but here we are. So in some cases, the thermostat can wedge itself. So I shine a light on the back and see if it's leaking on the front. What is that? Oh, I bet you that's the part of the Mickey Mouse flange. It's just breaking apart. All right, well, Mickey Mouse flange has decided to leave the chat. Otherwise, the thermostat actually looks okay. So I'll wipe that down and I'll just put some tape to cover it. Hose looks good. So I'm gonna go to these, rip these off. see what this has in store. Yeah, I knew it. That piece was from the Mickey Mouse flange. Yeah, it's all green, so somebody's used the wrong coolant in this car before. So you'll be able to see here, this just crumbles away. So when you don't use the right coolant, the plastic just gets super weak. This one is gonna need to be cleaned out thoroughly. And we'll plug this for the meantime. Oh, it's heavy. So next up, I'm gonna pull the intake manifold off here. First and foremost is the throttle body. So just these 4 bolts. So if you ever unplug these, it's a good idea to just reset your adaptations and don't manipulate the throttle body blade. All right, they're 11 mil. Stupid. I hear stuff cracking. All right, so let's take a gander. I don't think those have ever been done. Look at the big lump on that one. Look at that. Not good. What I'm gonna do for now is pull each plug to get a better indication as to how this was running. Number 2 plug was full of oil, which is never a good sign. That one's full of oil. Having carbon built up in the actual combustion chamber is a little bit weird because as it runs, it should burn all of that out if there's anything in there. But to see it just inside the cylinder wall is a bit weird. No, I don't think they've ever been changed. So on the plug itself, I don't know if it's going to show you. Here, there's a bunch of oil buildup. When you see a bunch of oil buildup on your plugs, it usually means the motor was not taken care of as well as you would like, and it could result in a oil burning issue. You can't really tell the health of an engine without tearing it apart to closely inspect everything, so you just have to kind of go on a whim. I mean, there's a few things that you could do, like the compression test that he had provided was pretty well 180 across, which is good. So if there's an issue with the valve seat or, for example, a ring, I guess, or a piston, if it had an issue, it would show up. So that's a good sign. I think it might just be just a really dirty engine. So we'll have to definitely give it a once over, try and clean out as much as we can. I was hoping that the valves weren't that bad. I was hoping I could go in with like a bit of a bristle brush or a brass brush to clean it out, but there's no way I'm gonna be able to do that. So I'll definitely need a walnut blaster. So I can't reseal the intake until I get that sorted. I guess for the meantime, I'm gonna blow out whatever I can that's in these tube seals. Since the engine likely has a tiny bit, or more than a tiny bit of water in it, just because I had seen some water on the throttle body and now in the valves, I'm gonna put a little bit of fogging oil into the cylinders. So I'm gonna pull each plug out, spray it in there, turn it over a handful of times, just so everything is nice and lubricated. So the fogging oil will displace any water. And if by chance there is water in the cylinders, of course I'll take a peek, but it'll keep the cylinder lubricated so the rings won't rust or pit, or the cylinder wall won't pit, I should say. All right, tops of the pistons are wet. Should be able to just turn it by hand now. What is that? So where we left off last time, there's a dinging noise and I couldn't figure out where it was. Now I'm gonna spin the motor over by hand, but when you spin it over, I'm gonna put the microphone close to the actuator. Can you hear the ringing? Weird noises are definitely not what you want to be hearing, especially when you're at this part of an engine rebuild refresh. I didn't know the answer, so of course I'm at the whim of online pages. Fortunately, there's quite a few smart people out there, much smarter than I. What they mentioned is that if the engine is left without prime or without oil for some time, the actuators can lose their prime and then they start to ding. So essentially what it is the actuator moving and then it dings back into place. Sorry, the heater in the background is making noise, but in our good old Canadian weather, we have to somehow heat our igloo, so bear with the noise for a bit. While you go to turn it over, the actuator, what's happening is the vanes inside are dinging along the housing. So when it loses its prime, you'll hear it and it'll be audible. Now, one thing that one guy had wanted me to try is these 16 mil nuts is you can see if it's going to continuously spin or if there's going to be play in it. So because those bolt into the actuators themselves, I was playing a little bit and they really don't move too far, but of course you don't want to be reefing on those because it can start to actuate and you can start opening valves, and you can see where this is going. You don't want that to happen. What I'm going to do just for peace of mind, because I have the timing tool set, is I'm going to put the engine at TDC. I'm going to pin the flywheel, and for the sake of it, I'm just going to verify timing. So I may as well do that while I'm in here. So this timing tool set, it's not the most expensive one, but I'm sure it's going to get the job done. So we're just going to thread it in by hand. I'm going to tighten these 10 mils. So with the engine at TDC, or as best as we can get without the flywheel or the flex plate on there, you'll see these will end up bottoming out. So again, they go right on either side of the cams. Now, if you look at it from the front here, these are dead flat. So we definitely have TDC. Now, I'm not going to put the bolts in because we're not doing anything with the chain, but these two holes here should coincide with these dowels here. So let's just double check. We'll get one in the dowel. Perfect. So if you look from the side here, the timing gear will be dead flat against the timing tool on both sides, and the dowels are in there. What does that verify? Timing is good. It rotates pretty well since I put some oil in it. It makes a lot of compression, so that's why I had to take plugs out. So I'm going to take it apart, we're going to throw the cover on, and we're going to continue with what we were doing. I started cleaning it, but because most of it's on the bottom, what I figured would be best is flip the motor upside down, take the oil pan off, clean it by hand elsewhere where I don't need to blindly spray brake clean. We're gonna seal it because the oil pan's not coming off. That's it, we're committed at that point. And take the front pulleys off. When you take the front pulleys off, we can spray it down with degreaser, give it a scrub, make sure it's nice and perfectly clean before you go to put it in the car. We're going to take this off very, very, very delicately because it's very, very brittle. I don't need more pieces making its way into the oil pan. So because we had these out, we're going to need to change the bolts. So my plan might be derailed a little bit here. These are one-time use aluminum bolts, so you definitely don't want to be reusing them. And in turn, there's going to be an O-ring on the inside. So let's take these bolts out. Now, for obvious reasons, don't drop them into your engine. Wiggle it out. That's a bit of a bummer. The last thing you want to do is reuse aluminum bolts and then have one weaken or break. And the torque spec will be a certain percentage and a certain angle. So not only do I need bolts now, or spend 80 bucks or $86 or whatever it was for the kit, I need to get a torque angle gauge. Normally, you'd be able to just clean this, put maybe the tiniest layer of sealant on it and throw the oil pan on, but we're at a bit of a stalemate. It's been some time since the last clip. I've been ordering parts, stocking parts, waiting for parts. Taylor's gonna go over the parts we have for the 1 Series and show you what we were waiting for. Now, most of them are here, still waiting on a couple of things, but now it's high time that I start working on my own motor.
So some of the parts, obviously this motor ate a good amount of metal, so it's a good time to upgrade the oil cooler. So bigger, better oil cooler that's gonna go on. CanTCU to control the 8 HP. There's a 335 diesel coolant tank because Tony decided to go baller status and get a forward facing manifold. I think he's gonna go port injection. It's still kind of up in the air, but there's a rail as well as injectors laying around. We have the 0-3 manifold for the turbo. We have the turbo. Tile wastegate with the forward-facing charge pipe, and a bunch of maintenance stuff kind of just floating around that we got to do while we're in there. Valve cover gasket, oil pan gasket, oil filter housing gasket, basically any gasket that we can get our hands onto. It's going to get refreshed while the motor's out, and that's about it. So now it's the fun part of getting ready to put all the shiny parts on.
Goes without saying.
Excited.
Taylor's excited.
I'm very excited.
It goes without saying that I'm eventually and slowly getting excited because now it's time to put the final touches on the motor. So for the oil pickup, this is what we're using for part number. That's for the O-ring for the pickup here. And of course you see the 3 bolts here that we're gonna end up replacing. Now the 3 bolts here, I'm gonna show you really quick. So the factory ones have a bit of a color to the bolt head, but the entire length is 30 mil. Brand new bolts that haven't been used or heat cycled through oil. They're shiny, but these are one-time use, so you don't want to reuse them ever. You also never want to drop them. So for the oil pickup, I'm going to use a little bit of oil, lube up the O-ring, and similar to an oil filter, without dropping it, you roll it up and over. And because this is all plastic, you want to be a little bit careful. It's all going to be submerged in oil, but just wiggle it to make sure the O-ring doesn't flatten out and doesn't give you any problems. It'll click to the bottom, and you can chuck the bolts in. So these account for 4 Newton meters, which I don't even know how I'm going to account for 4 Newton meters. 4 Newton meters plus 100 degrees. So I'll show you what tool I have to account for angle. When you are a little bit ghetto and you don't use this very often, this is an angle torque gauge. You put this onto the bolt head and it holds, and then as you turn it, the dial will actually turn. So what you end up doing is there's going to be an Allen key that locks this side in place. So as you rotate it, you'll turn the degree. Funny enough, I wasn't able to actually use this angle torque adapter on the oil pan pickup. I didn't really want it to sit against the plastic portion, and really 90 degrees isn't all that much. Just mark it with a Sharpie and turn it 90 degrees roughly, and you're going to be more than fine. You'll feel the bolts bottom out, stretch a bit, they're perfectly okay. It was a little bit awkward, but we did end up using it for the oil pan. Some of them you have to try a little bit harder to get the little Allen key or whatever we're going to call it to get into place to actually hold the unit. But once you end up getting the rhythm or the routine behind it, it really wasn't all too bad. Now these bolts, they're torqued to 8 Newton meters, and then some bolts were 90 degrees angle and some were 180 degrees angle. When we ended up getting the gasket from Male, I believe it was, or Victor Reigns, wherever the company is, they ended up supplying a torque sheet. So just follow it and go in a crisscross pattern to ensure that the entire pan goes down evenly. Other than that, just use a little bit of common sense and it'll work out perfectly fine for you. We just finished, I should loosen it. We just finished the oil pan gasket. Now, when we ended up pulling the oil pan off the initial time and we saw that the oil pickup was a little bit loose, we remembered that the guy ended up pulling the pickup and everything just to show us that there was no material or anything inside of it, which is good, but we needed to make sure that it was all nice and torqued. Now, a lot of you will probably not be bothered remotely about just snugging those bolts up and running it, but I'm a little bit, I don't know, paranoid or whatever you want to call it. So I wanted to make sure that it was all done proper. What's next? We're gonna do the valve cover gasket, just to make sure that the engine itself is nice and sealed. The harness is just gonna lay to the side. Of course, power wire and whatever else, we're just gonna tuck underneath. We're gonna move most of this stuff down, out maybe, We're going to consolidate a lot of it. After we change the valve cover gasket here and the valve cover itself, because this one is suspect, I think it has a hole in it, we will reseal it, get that all nice, torqued, buttoned up, do the walnut blasting, and then we're gonna hang the manifold just temporarily because I wanna see what it looks like. We're gonna pull this out. I'm gonna run it through the parts washer. It's essentially parts tank with Varsol, so we're gonna clean it really nice and make sure that there's no garbage inside here. And then we're gonna start hanging the single turbo swap. Of course, that's gonna be the two ON3 manifolds. Eventually we'll throw plugs in it, but because I put a little bit of fogging oil in the cylinders just for storage sake, we'll make sure that walnuts don't get mixed with that and that we're not gonna have any issues. I should have mentioned ahead of time before we actually put the valve cover on and reseal it, that we were going to install the RB head plug ports. Now the RB PCV delete fitting will end up blocking off the ports that go internally to the inside of the valve cover, and it does end up converting it to an external setup. This way you don't need to worry about carbon buildup on the valves, and it ends up keeping your engine running a lot cleaner. And of course with oil, you don't need to worry about any contaminants or reduction in octane. So this here, it ends up using a Toyota PCV valve and of course converts it to external for you to run a catch can. When I was installing these, I probably went a little bit deeper than I should have, but it's very important to use a good red Loctite. The last thing you want is for them to back out, but as long as you don't thread all the way down, they can't fall into the chambers where the valves are. For the valve cover, you've already saw us do one of these if you've been on the channel for a little while. They're pretty simple and straightforward. You end up just following a schematic on which one to torque. There's 31 some odd bolts. They're not torqued down super tight, but of course you can always reference the other video where we ended up replacing it on Zach's single turbo E90 if you're looking for a reference or a how-to guide. So today we're going to be pulling the plugs, starting the walnut blast. Now for the walnut blast, because my valves are that bad, I can't really tell when the valves are actually fully closed. The last thing you want is to have a valve hang open and then you end up filling a valve or a cylinder with walnut shells, which is not ideal. So what I'm going to do is take the plugs out, and that way I can confirm TDC with each cylinder, and then I'll do one by one. So the way I check, and it's a bit of an old school way, of course you could use something wooden or soft. You can see if you put this one into the spark plug hole, it stops right away. So this cylinder would be pretty close to TDC, whereas this one would not. So you can see that one goes in way further. If you put that in there, and then I use the 7/8 on the crank, and you want to turn it clockwise, you'll see that the stick actually goes up and down. So in an ideal situation, have a stick that's long enough, have it go up, and when it gets to the top, you'll see it stop as you start to turn it, right before it starts to go down. So that's a little bit past TDC, but you get the idea. So because this one's at TDC, we're gonna start with 6, and then we're gonna go 5, 4, 3, 2, and so forth. I'll put some pictures on the screen of what my valves currently look like. They're disgusting. I have never seen them this bad, even though all the valves are getting cleaned. I'm still gonna block off the ports that I'm not doing right this second. I don't want anything to go inside the engine, so you have a couple of options. You can throw the coil packs in really quick, or in my case, I'm just gonna put a bag over top. Sometimes a towel works too. Now, because my cylinders are unbelievably bad, and the dog wants to chase the light, what I need to do, or my decision, is going to be to scrape them ahead of time and try to blow out what I can with compressed air. But cylinder 6 over here, I don't think I've seen one worse. So scraping ahead of time is going to be a good idea. Now I did get these long picks of all different kinds, so you'll need some that are at least roughly 6-7 inches long to be able to get in behind and scrape it. This one I use particularly to get in behind the valve. If we're pretending that this is the valve, you can actually get it in behind and rotate it and then clean the back side of the valve with this one here. Now my setup, it drinks through walnuts extremely fast, so I'll probably be able to get through the 6 valves, but it'll dump this entire tank within 6 valves. I'm gonna pre-scrape it, and then I'm gonna get to this, and then take the straight and the right angle one, clean up and around the valve seat as best I can, and go from there. This here is going to be the final result. Let's see if I can zoom in properly, maybe. So there's the one valve. You can see it's nice and squeaky clean. There's the second one. Now the tiny bit of walnut in the valve seat you don't need to worry about. You can't scrape that out. And at the same time, as soon as you end up running the motor, it's just going to burn up anyways. It's looking pretty damn good. And inside here, I just went with a Scotch-Brite just to clean up the remnants of oil. Cleaned it up with some brake clean. And now I get to do it 5 more times. And I'm gonna bore you with it. I'm gonna do it on my own, and I'll show you the end result. It's been 42 years since I last touched this engine. However, we did end up finishing all of the valve blasting. Of course, it's not soda blasting, it's actually walnut blasting. I think the grit we used was 18 by 40, whatever it was, super fine. There's a pain in the backside. I think I ended up spending probably 6 to 8 hours doing the majority of cylinders, and the result is good. Now, did I need to spend that long? Probably not, but here we are. Now these plugs are actually kind of handy, especially when I end up doing more walnut blasting. They just push in. These ones here are just 3D printed. So if you know somebody that can 3D print the walnut blasting portion, it's the same diameter, just literally inner diameter and a plug so it stops partway in the port. What we've done off screen is finished wrapping part of the engine harness. So Taylor ended up wrapping part of the harness here that's going to be tucked underneath the coils. I resealed the Vanos solenoids. So the 2 solenoids in the front, very seldom do they leak. I wasn't about to risk it. So just 2 10 mils, and they have 2 seals here. One's more of a stand and one's an O-ring. Push those 2 back in. The majority of the front stuff we're gonna leave until the engine's in the vehicle. I'm going to, in the meantime, mark and pull off the harmonic balancer to put a crank seal guard on. I need to change the alternator off of the other one because this one's a bit gross and it looks like the pulley has a bit of a wobble. It's a clutched pulley, so occasionally these do seize. This one here, it's spinning a bit too easy, so whether that's good or not, I don't know. The other one has lower mileage on it, so I'll chuck it on here. Water pump and thermostat, we're gonna replace off of the 1 Series. Now the 1 Series had that done just about a year ago, so part of the only maintenance that was ever done to the vehicle was a water pump and thermostat because it had failed. I'm gonna leave those on here for mocking up purposes. Taylor's already popped in a bunch of the blank off plates. We have the oil feed here. I think that's just a -3 or -4 AN. You have the upper coolant plug here, the other one over here, the oil drain plug. And of course, when Taylor ended up putting these all in, the little O-ring, just put a little bit of oil or a little bit of Vaseline, pop those in. These quite literally just hold it in place, so don't reef on them because it is a steel bolt, again, into an aluminum block. The ports here, we're gonna pull the tape off. I'm gonna clean the surface up really nice, and I'm gonna make sure that the ports are nice and clean for the graphite O-rings. Of course, if any little bit of dust goes inside, it's just gonna blow it out. Other than that, we're gonna throw on the manifold and mock up the turbo, which is kind of exciting. For the manifolds, you've probably seen, if you've been around for a while, that the graphite rings go right up and along here. So when you put the rings on, just make sure that you seat them really nicely and carefully. Inside here, the ports, make sure they're nice and clean. It's easiest when it's on an engine stand. Of course, you're not always gonna have that luxury. Take a pick, clean it up really nice so that it has a really nice sealing surface. And then we're gonna start by installing them. along with all the other goodies that we got from On3 or ON3, I think it's On3 anyway, is the wastegate. Now this is a tile style replica wastegate. Of course, it's a big boy. What we need to confirm, and again, it's nice that we can actually do this on the stand. We're gonna try and figure out exactly which ports we're gonna want and which way we're gonna want it to be mocked up. So when we go to change the springs, you can see you have your little 3 mil or 4 mil Allen heads. Now this entire setup, you can rotate it. So ideally what we're gonna do is we're either gonna use the top port here, plug this one, or one of these side ports. So these large ports, you can see where there's the block offs. These are nothing, these are just a vent. So don't worry about that. Maybe it's a vent, I'm not sure.
Water port if you want.
Oh, water port. Again, we're gonna mock it up because ideally what we wanna do is we wanna have all the lines away from the turbo. So if it's mocked up roughly around here, we want the lines pointing away from the manifold so that we can properly wrap them in, I don't know what they call it, lava sleeve or whatever it is. So lines to the Mac valve. Now for springs, they give you a handful of springs. So you can see here that you have your red, yellow, green. Springs that are currently in it, installed 2 springs, so we got 11 PSI total. That's pretty close to where we're gonna wanna run it for now. And it shows you large spring 6 PSI, small spring 5 PSI. If you purchased additional springs, of course they give you the springs, red, yellow, and green, so 3, 4, and 8 PSI respectfully. We're gonna be eventually wanting to turn this up to probably 26, 28 pounds. Of course, we're gonna see if it's really worth cranking it up. Most Mac valves, you can only double the spring pressure. So if you have like a 3-port, you can generally, if you run 15 pounds, you could run a max of roughly 30. It's gonna be different and it's gonna be dependent based on your altitude. In this case, we're gonna be aiming to run probably a 14-pound spring combination, and then at our altitude, that'll give us about 12 to 13. But we should have a fair enough headroom if we decide to run 26. And I think 26 is kind of where we're gonna aim for. That's gonna be way more power than the little rear wheel drive can. Wait, you giving me thumbs up?
No, more.
We're gonna be turning it up. We're gonna be pretty limited. It's still an open rear diff with the E diff. We still have the 8 HP 45, which is good for about 650 wheel torque. So with the tuner, we can try and keep the longevity of the transmission, but we're gonna put a 14-pound spring combination in and go from there. I'm sure some people are going to get a little bit triggered at our choice of filters, and I'm hoping it kind of works. We're going to put an HKS mushroom on the German 2JZ. I like it. For the most part, this side's done. There's not a whole lot more that we need to do, but you can see the way we ended up orientating, or the way we oriented the wastegate. The 2 lines, we can put just silicone hose and put a heat sleeve over top of this. It's gonna stay away from the turbo, and it's gonna go to the strut tower where the Mac valve is gonna sit. This is all a little bit loose. It's gonna end up moving just a hair. I don't know if we're gonna have to take this off to get it into the vehicle or into the engine bay, just because the motor mount is here. We're gonna see. For the most part, we can sneak it in and then lower it down onto the subframe and the motor mounts, so it really shouldn't be in our way. And then once we have all the clearances set, we'll tighten it all, and then generally after a heat cycle, you'll go in and re-snug everything else. We're gonna toss the intake manifold onto the other side and see what it's gonna look like. Other than that, there isn't a whole lot for us to do before we put it in the vehicle. For the most part, what we've done is all you can really do while it's outside the vehicle. We're going to clean the intake manifold properly. We may need to remove it when we go to fit it inside of the vehicle, just so it doesn't get dinged up against the strut tower. Other than that, the majority of everything else is just going to need to be done when the motor's inside the vehicle. In the last episode, we continued with throwing stuff at this motor to get it up and ready. Of course, we did a full inspection. We resealed it. We did the oil pan, gasket, valve cover gasket, new valve cover at this point, and budget kind of went out the window. We might be kind of close, but we're gonna have to see. So I'm gonna show you really quick what we ended up adding just off screen and give you a rundown. For this one here, we ended up resealing the oil filter housing. Now both gaskets were done, so the one that actually meets the block and the cooler one just inside here. Of course, I needed a bit of a reminder just in case. This was all nice, cleaned down. I ended up spraying it down with gasoline and used a brush, so it turned out pretty nice and clean. In behind the harmonic balancer, we ended up putting the crank seal guard. Now this one here, when I had the balancer off, there was clear indication that it had ate a belt at some point. So fortunately, it's all good and clear. We checked in the block, in the pan, nothing's there. This was new, so that's just something that kind of coincides. You end up opening this up to get everything off the chain when it eats a belt. Mickey Mouse flange, of course, this is just the rain version. Not sure why it's white, not aluminum, but we'll go with it. The piece de resistance is the front-facing sheet metal manifold. Now this is a BMP version, and of course I learned a little bit the hard way, we'll say, is that this flange wasn't welded at the right angle. So I'm gonna have to figure out what I'm gonna do for that. But moving here, we're gonna have some DW 750 injectors with the point rail, of course the Precision Raceworks coil conversion, and the blue spaghetti noodles that are going up and over. This year we ended up taking the bracket and ended up flipping it, I believe, 180. So it was originally like this, and we have it a little bit further back. Reason being is the coils are gonna sit a little bit further. It's gonna be up and over the runners, so you're not gonna have to stare and see all the disaster in between them. But at the same token, if you disconnect all of these, and you disconnect the two screws here, you'll be able to actually pull the rail up and out if you need to pull out these injectors without having to fully disassemble your coil packs. So this we're gonna just leave as is for now. And moving over to the turbo. This is the 013-6466 turbo with the T4 flange upgrade. Other than that, we just tried to mock it up as best we could with the coolant pipe. Of course, I find out after that this is off a manual, so we're gonna have to swap this for the one that's actually in the vehicle. And like I mentioned in the previous video, water pump and thermostat, because this vehicle, that's the only thing that it had for maintenance, and this is questionable. So we're gonna start on the vehicle here. Of course, I got my helpers here. There's Joseph and Taylor. Thoughts, Taylor?
Let's go.
I think he's more excited than I am. I think the both of them are more excited than I am.
Let's go.
Whoosh.
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 Like any other project, we start by staring at the vehicle and starting to turn bolts and removing pieces. The poor front lip that was on this vehicle has seen better days. I'm not completely certain if we're going to be refinishing it or replacing it. I guess time will tell. Of course, this vehicle on its own is the gift that keeps on giving, whether it's bits or aggravation.
Tony, you found a bit.
Another one? No way. Come on.
From the car?
Had to have.
Here we have the 135 archaeology. So this one here was found in the outlet. This little one right here was found in the intercooler, and this one was on the skid plate. Maybe if we look hard enough, we'll have a set, and then I'll just give them back. Taylor jumps inside and starts to remove the factory shifter. Now, because we're going with an 8 HP 45, it's going to be what's called an E shift. So the 135 has an M shift, so a manual shift or a mechanical shift with linkages going down to the transmission. The E shift is simply just harnesses. After Taylor starts taking that apart, we pull the front end off, which ends up coming out quite easy, or a lot easier than I had expected. And once the front end is off, you can start by taking everything else off. Note to self, when you go to remove the AC lines, just make sure that all of the compressed air, make sure all the compressed air is out of the lines before you disconnect them.
Whoa. What the f is that?
My eyes are spicy.
What just popped?
Look at me for a second.
What was that?
Was that cool? No, it's the refrigerant.
Oh, so you drained it.
I did. It must have built up a bit of pressure and it went right in my face. Yeah, Taylor or whatever, shut up. I don't want to hear it. Of course, after we end up taking off the front end, including the radiator, the AC condenser, intercooler, and all that jazz, Taylor can slide underneath to remove the torque converter bolts. So as I spin the motor over by hand, it gives Taylor access to each bolt head. Of course, right through the inspection window or whatever it's called. It's easier to do this in the car than out. After Taylor is done pretending that he's actually doing something, now it's time to actually pull this lump out of the vehicle. We lift it up and over the subframe and throughout. It's a lot easier once you end up having the drive shaft and everything disconnected so that you can pull the transmission in one. And of course, we're left with a gaping hole that's called the engine bay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as you may or may not have seen, we fought with it a little bit, but being that this one's rear-wheel drive, I guess it could have been a lot worse. There's the sad lump sitting there in its glory. As you can see, we have quite the mess ahead of us to clean up. For the most part, it went relatively okay. The nicest part, I guess you could say, would be we didn't need to remove the steering rack. We didn't need to drop the subframe. We didn't need to do the majority of that. I think the only thing we had to do was just move this one power steering line. Of course, the rear inlet, this one needed to avenge its brothers. It didn't want to break for us to get out. Now, the biggest reason why we ended up needing to take the inlet off is when you go to pull the motor, you have this tiny little hole here. So what we do is we chuck a bolt through there and then the chain and up and around. So the biggest thing is you don't want the chain to be on the plastic manifold, otherwise it can crack it. But with that stupid bloody inlet up and around here, it was fighting us. And yeah, that one didn't want to break like every other one that I've dealt with. So whatever, inlet 1, Tony 7. So my odds are still pretty all right. Now we, again, just threw it in a tire because I need to just double check everything on this side here to finish that. Some things we probably didn't show you is the alternator, it's bad. So the clutch pulley is bad on both of them. One has play and one is actually locked up a bit. Other than that, to get around the steering shaft, we just needed to loosen this engine mount so it doesn't smack the steering shaft. Last thing you want to do is have it bent or dented or whatever. It's all aluminum. All in all, it's not too bad. Of course, for cleanliness sake, as you can see, these gloves started white, and why did I just do that? So I'm going to dig out the pressure washer. Hopefully it's thawed up by now, or at least the lines. And hopefully I can actually turn on the pressure washer, or at least the hose on the side of the house. I'm going to pre-pressure wash it. So spray it all off with whatever will come. Spray down with a degreaser, scrub it, get it nice and squeaky clean. It wouldn't make a lot of sense to put a nice clean engine into a dirty ass engine bay. Yeah, good times. And we're back. It's been 52 years and I haven't aged a day. For the engine itself, what we ended up doing off screen for the most part, I actually show you here, is we ended up wrapping the majority of the harness just with fabric tape. Of course, because we ended up having a spare motor, I ended up just labeling them all. Relatively foolproof. For up here, we did what we could to just retain all of the factory pieces, but of course we're going to clean this all up once the time comes. We did take the alternator, starter, and whatnot off. The alternator was bad, so I had to get that rebuilt. So there's been quite a few things that have been happening in the background. Other than the obvious in here, one other thing is we did end up drilling the fuel rail. So if you end up looking at a photo, now you can look at any N54 fuel rail. The inlet right in here is a pinhole size. So I drilled it out to 1/16 with a drill bit. And I did the exact same for each one of these. Now between the N53, which is the European model, non-turbo direct injection, it has a 3mm size hole, which I can't understand why you would have it, but people have gained a couple or a few hundred PSI of rail pressure simply by drilling it. Now, along with that, there's a little filter just inside the high pressure fuel pump that you can pick out for obvious reasons. Put an inline 10 micron filter and you're off to the races. couple other things that I guess I should mention is this here is the high side flapper. So if you end up breaking off that four-piece, what you can do, because this is the same size as the port on the valve cover, all I end up doing is find whatever size hose this is and put a worm clamp on it, and you're pretty much good to go. It has the RB PCV valve that integrates the Toyota Supra PCV valve right from Toyota. So that'll go to a catch can once we get it in the car and situated. That's relatively it for this. Now, going over to the engine bay, we ended up degreasing it. And of course, I ended up using a very special European formula of degreaser to spray down, scrub it, and clean it as best we can. It's going to be really nice to have a clean base to work with when we go to put a clean engine into it. And it only made sense because it was filthy. If we end up walking over here, you'll end up seeing a bunch of the stuff that we ended up taking off of the other engine that we're going to use, like the power steering pump, because this one has, I believe it's called active steering. We have the AC compressor, and then this plethora of parts. Of course, we ended up taking the oil cooler off, and somebody kindly used it to hold the turbo up so it wouldn't fall over. That was good. We have the intake manifold, PR coils, and a bunch of other stuff. 335 diesel coolant tank. Of course, that's the factory DIMI, forward-facing charge pipe, the wastegate dump, upgraded motor mounts, upgraded transmission mounts. Hiding underneath here is going to be the 8 HP 45. So of course I end up having two. So I have an X-drive version and a rear-wheel drive version. I threw the torque converter on. Now, for those of you at home that are considering doing this, you're going to use the torque converter off of the N55 engine. So this one specifically came off of, it was either an X5 with the N55 or the X3 with the N55. This is exactly what you need. It ends up having the flat flanges here, and this will bolt up directly to the flex plate on the N54. Now, because the original vehicle had a 6-bolt and we're going to an 8-bolt, we have an 8-bolt flex plate to bolt onto the back of the motor. So we're going to bolt that onto the back of the motor, and in turn we're going to bolt this to the back of the motor. For the bolts that came out, there are half of them or 3/4 of them that are aluminum. Now, these are one-time use. You do not want to reuse them. Some of them are steel. So the plan is to bolt this transmission to the motor with the steel bolts. I'll probably temporarily put the aluminum bolts in case I feel that it's a little bit weak when you go to put it inside the engine bay. But for the most part, the aluminum bolts you can swap afterwards. So I'll take the aluminum ones to a bolt shop, and a grade 8.8 bolt will suffice. The only real other thing, actually, I guess this would be a good comparison, is because this is out of an N20 engine, so the 4-cylinder, it's flat right up top here, whereas this one has the cutout for it. This ends up posing a bit of a problem because when you end up putting the starter here, you end up losing the eyelet to hold the engine and transmission. So we're trying to get a little bit crafty when we bolt it in, because we're going to be missing that hole to help bolt it into the vehicle. Now, some people could probably drill through this casing, but that's going to be a little bit too thin, and I don't really like that. So I'm going to leave this as is. This, if anything, will be for strength. And you just got to tap the one hole, chuck it in. If I could whip it out the car and it installs itself, that would be great, but it won't. Nope. It's now time for the motor to come off of the stand. We're going to pull the stand out of the way, and we're going to lower it just above a tire. Now, this tire was used more of a safety thing, just in case the chain decided to slip or snap or whatever. We lower it enough so we can get the flex plate onto the back of it. The bolts that actually bolt the flex plate to the hub itself, because we're going with, I think it's an 8-bolt. Yeah, it's an 8-bolt flex plate. You need to end up using 8 very specific bolts that are going to be mounting it directly to the back of the crankshaft. Tightening it, you want to ensure that there's no grit or grime between the face of the flex disc and the end of the crankshaft, and tighten them slowly in a star pattern, alternating one against the other. And of course, me being either half asleep or in a rush, not sure whichever, I didn't end up putting Loctite on, so joke's on me. You want to make sure before you start to snug them down or torque them to spec that you're going to be using some red Loctite. In this case, I used some gel, not that it's needed, but whatever. Taylor ends up torquing the bolts on the back while I end up holding the crank. Now, As you're tightening it, the engine's going to be wanting to turn counterclockwise, and you don't want this to happen for the simple fact that the timing chain could get some slack and it could jump a tooth. So while Taylor starts to torque it, he ends up counting to 3, and as he counts to 3, I start to press in the opposite direction on the snout of the crankshaft. It's a 22 mil right on the end of the crank, right by the crank hub pulley itself. So again, as Taylor torques it, I put pressure in the opposite direction so that it doesn't slip or move at all. Afterwards, now it's time to mount the 8 HP. This was a bit annoying, and I decided to manhandle it, pick it up, throw it on the studs, while I waited ever so patiently for Taylor to put 2 bolts in opposing one another. Of course, by patient was lack thereof, but we got it done, so it really doesn't matter in the end. One thing you need to keep in mind when you're using one out of an N series, even though it may end up being an 8 HP, is right here. Now I put the smallest little blue Sharpie dot. I'm hoping that that's accurate. So what you need to do is you need to actually drill a hole similar to this so that it actually connects to the block itself. We're going to use a small drill bit and a punch so it doesn't walk around. And hopefully I don't make the hole too big, and hopefully it's where it needs to be. There. Taylor's going to end up taking off the engine mount. Now the reason we take off the driver's side engine mount is simply to get it up and around the steering shaft, because I don't want to disassemble it or get it loose. For here, we have the 2 brackets. So this is the original one off the 8-speed, and this is the 6 HP. If you put them side by side, now it's going to be a little bit harder for you guys to see, but these bolts are all lined up here, but these are offset ever so slightly. So that 1/2 inch could be enough for it not to work properly. So when you do an 8-speed swap, simply just unbolt the 8-speed one, put the 6-speed one in, like that. Put the 13s underneath and call it good. Now, of course, we're doing this simply to mount it in the vehicle, just because this one here wiggles a lot more, so it has more flex for us to be able to locate the bolts. And these ones here, being that these are the 2 series ones, they made them super, super soft and added this nylon tether to it. Ooh, yeah, don't do that. But these are soft. So when we go to tip the motor in, we can have it down like this. Taylor can put a couple of bolts in, and then we don't need to worry about the rear as we lower it onto the engine mounts. Of course, I have stiffer ones. I think they're a 95A. So they're going to be a lot stiffer than these. And for the 8-speed one, throw it at you, buddy. Well, it's a moment of truth, ladies and gents, or gents, I'm sure. We're going to toss this lump in the car, and as a ceremonial thing, we're going to ride it like a cowboy and, you know, Alberta things. Next step, we're going to toss it in, hopefully not damage or ding anything, and go from there. While we go to install the engine and transmission, it's always good to end up having a second set of eyes and at least another pair of hands, just to see what you cannot. When you go to install this lump, the transmission itself, it ends up blocking where you would end up putting the chain when you go to pull the engine and transmission out. So the issue we ran into is that the engine was a little cockeyed when it was going in, and because it's such a tight fit, it was nothing but a pain. But of course, we persevered and we got it done. With a couple bumps and bruises and some hurt egos, it was good that the buddies were able to help. It's April 12th, 2024. I'm reporting in after a disastrous week. Well, I guess it wasn't disastrous. Stressful weekend installing this engine. I guess I really can't complain. It wasn't all that bad. But of course, when you put the 8-speed out of a 4-cylinder, so like an N20 engine, you lose the hook to lift the actual engine. So all of the chains and contraptions I had didn't really work all that well, because it ended up tipping the motor. Even 10 degrees was a big issue. So I'm going to show you where it was rubbing and the issues that we ran into. The valve cover right here, so this little piece, when it was tipped the extra 10%, this was getting caught and rubbing on everything, including the AC lines, brake line, rad support, and so forth. The entire engine, it was tipped about that, and it was kind of cockeyed. It was a huge pain in the backside, but we're chipping away. So there's a few things that I had an issue with. I had to remove the coils here because it was rubbing just on here. The coils are going to sit a bit lower. Essentially, I just took the extension piece out of here and they actually fit. Originally, they were sitting kind of about here and I didn't think it was going to be an issue, but turns out it is. This gets lowered. It was probably 1.5 inches, almost 2 inches, and the coils have to flip upside down so that it fits just underneath, barely, like this. So you can see I even need to kind of slide it in like this. And there it goes. You can see where the wire ends up plugging in. There's not a whole lot of area for that one. So once they're bolted in, it's going to be pretty tight. Ideally, I'm going to see if I can somehow take this and bend it. I would like for the coils to sit a little bit straighter. This is not ideal. The boot's going to be right up against here, and I don't want to run into any issues if you hit a pothole or something. So I'll try and figure out if I can tip these a bit. Of course, with the 335 diesel tank, we're running into an issue with the port here. Yeah, otherwise it works really well. Let's just put that here so it can fall. Stay. Now this port, I'm gonna end up cutting off and we're gonna put an NPT fitting just inside here. And I'm gonna see if I can end up getting one that's a smaller fitting here just because there wouldn't be too much material. But ideally we're gonna be cutting this flange off. If you see, that ain't gonna work, especially the way the throttle body is. So we're gonna have to do one of these and then the hose is gonna fit up and over the charge pipe. So that won't be the end of the world. Now the other issue I ran into was the throttle body. I test fit the alternator here just temporarily. It's still a big boy, so it comes out to about here. And being a BMP manifold, there was a handful of them that were welded at the wrong angle, and lo and behold, mine's the wrong angle. So for the throttle body itself, we're gonna have to position it in a way where it's actually going to clear everything. Now the actuator might end up being on top or on the bottom, but that's gonna make things a little bit complicated when we go to bolt it all together. So for now, I just wanted to test fit this, get the headache out of the way and go from there. Another issue I ran into, there's been a bunch of issues, but we're gonna end up fighting through them, wasn't necessarily the power steering. I think it was the oil cooler lines. So the oil cooler lines, one thing to keep in mind is the ports on the 8-speed are 18 millimeter and the lines themselves are 12. So with CanTCU, they just came out with an adapter plate. Essentially, it's a small sandwich that bolts into the 8 HP housing and you just put the factory lines into it. For now, I'm gonna be running the factory 6-speed cooler. It's gonna be more than enough. Some people say you end up running 10, 15 degrees cooler than if you were to run the 8-speed one or an aftermarket one, which overcools. Another issue I ran into, I'm not sure if I showed, is this. This output flange on the 6 HP is actually larger. So this gibo or flex disc doesn't fit on the 8 HP. So what we're gonna need to do is the nut just inside here. Let's see if I can show you. That nut there is a 12.34 mil. You're gonna need a deep socket 34 mil to get that off. Now it's only torqued to apparently 44 Newton meters, so it's not the end of the world. But I need to order that socket. It's going to be relatively easy, knock on wood. That one I just need to put onto the 8-speed, and the 8-speed is gonna essentially be a spare. Now the 8-speed is out of a 2 series, so the flange is smaller. I think it's roughly 10 mil or whatever it is. But that's a bit of an update. We've got the nice shiny alternator ready to go in, the sad motor sitting on the stand, and maybe some fancy boys, because apparently I never own real wheels. We're gonna just stick with the factory oil cooler for now to keep costs down. It really doesn't need to be changed. I wanna get it done, but I don't wanna be rushing this. So I'm gonna end up just playing Tetris. We're going to figure that dilemma out and chip away at getting it put together. We ended up removing the intake manifold because it was just there for mock-up purposes. Now, the manifold was kind of in the way. I wanted to make sure that all of the connectors were routed properly, where there'd be no tension, and make sure that the lengths were correct. So removing the manifold gave us a little bit more room.
for us to install the recently rebuilt alternator. Of course, between two, both are bad, so I figured at this time, since it'd be a nuisance to change afterwards, I would just have it rebuilt. After the alternator gets installed, we can move on to the AC compressor and again replace the intake manifold for testing and clearance purposes. This is where I had to start scratching my head to figure out how everything was going to work and what I was going to do for the orientation of the throttle body. Afterwards, I decided to take a bit of a break and Taylor slid underneath to replace the torque converter bolts. Same as before, so as you go to replace them, we end up putting some blue Loctite on them. As I spin the motor, Taylor throws them in, one opposing the other, and then you go from there.
For the most part, we got the majority of the stuff all plugged in and where it needs to go. The next part is going to be putting the intake manifold on. Just wanted to make sure, because the intake manifold, it takes up quite a bit of real estate, that we're not going to have to take it in and out and in and out. So I wanted to make sure that when we were at the time where we could just put it in, we leave it, we're good. So I'm going to show you what we ended up doing, give you a bit of a rundown. For all of these here, this branch of wires are what are going to go to the DME box, and there's going to be a few of them, like the intake T-map. This is going to be, I believe, EVAP. And then there's going to be another one. This one here you're not going to use. That's for the PCV heater, so we can just ignore that. I don't think I'm going to end up putting the PCV heater in line. There's no point. It's just going to be a vented catch can at that point. We have the 3.5 bar extension cable. Now, why PR made it this bloody long, I have no idea, but that's okay, whatever, we'll deal with that. Over here is the one we extended for the throttle body. This is going to sit somewhere up and around. So let's put it with that one there. And these two here are going to be for the AC. This one goes here. That one goes just over there. I put a little rubber cap on the alternator because the last thing you need is to touch the positive post when the battery's connected and have it short or ground on something. One kind of neat thing that I ended up doing is from the brake booster here, I used the factory one and took out the adapter piece here that had the two ports facing that way towards the vacuum pots. So for this one here, it's actually off an N55. It clips right on top of the high pressure fuel pump. It runs up and around, and it actually has a bracket for there. And then it follows up and around and it goes to the factory brake booster line, which is pretty neat. So we're going to chip away at it. The coolant tank works good. I have a good idea as to how I'm going to put the power steering reservoir, at least the billet portion from 0-3, and we'll see how it goes. Of course, there's going to be some small things that we're going to need to deal with when the time comes, but even small little details like these aluminum posts will stand the coolant tank off about 1.5 inches. That'll give us enough clearance for the hose that comes off of the coolant tank to clear the intake manifold and the throttle body. Okay, we're gonna get back at it.
It is now the time for the intake manifold to go to its final resting place. It was a bit of a nuisance to get it in place, but with a little perseverance, again, we ended up getting it where it needed to be. Don't end up putting the studs in. What we ended up doing is we just put one to hold the manifold in place and then slowly thread them in one by one. Now, when you go to snug it down, make sure that you end up tightening one nut from across the other nut so that it ends up snugging down evenly and symmetrical. Taylor had a great idea that because this is going to be buried in behind everything else, that we should smoke test it while it's in there and while we have access. And lo and behold, it's fine, thankfully. For the catch cans, the high side was relatively easy. The BMS can that we used goes into the location that you would expect on the strut bar here. The lines that came with it were a touch too short for it to clear the manifold, so we ended up needing to wait to get some reinforced silicone hoses. The small one, we ended up mounting to this weird plastic little bracket. It wasn't ideal, but you know what? It worked out pretty good. Afterwards, once we ended up getting the reinforced silicone hose, of course, I didn't tell them I wanted black, so they gave me blue, which I guess kind of goes with the theme. We ended up routing both catch cans, the high side and the low side, to the respective valves. Of course, high side for the high flapper valve and the low side to the RB PCV delete. We end up moving on to all the small fiddly stuff. Now, because we ended up moving the coolant tank over to the opposite side, you need to extend the coolant hose with a 5/8 piece of heater hose. It wasn't the end of the world, but sitting and being able to stare at it head on was actually relatively nice. Once you end up adapting it with a few brass barb fittings and you throw on some hose clamps, the hardest part was trying to get the length correct to ensure that the hose wasn't going to kink and it wasn't going to bend. After we ended up getting the hose where we needed it, we start by installing all of the pulleys. Of course, if you've watched any of our other videos before, it's all relatively straightforward. Put a little bit of Loctite on each bolt, put the pulleys in their respective locations, and once you're done, torque them to spec, put all the caps on, and put the belt on.
We ended up running into a couple of issues. Taylor had a good idea. Don't admit to him or whatever. Don't tell him I said this. But we had a couple of issues with exhaust manifold and the wastegate. We ended up checking for leaks with a smoke tester. So we have the trusty smoke tester jerry-rigged here with the Optima battery. Now the issue we ran into was that clamp right back there. What in the hell was that? Is that a wild doggo? Hey, you. The flange in behind there that meets the two manifolds, or where the two manifolds meet, one portion is supposed to go inside the other, and then the outer flanges are meant to sit flat on top of each other. Now, when you end up tightening that V-band, they're meant to be a tight seal. Of course, I ended up cranking that one down, and it's still leaking for whatever reason when we smoke test it. And the wastegate here is leaking from everywhere possible. So right inside here, you can't quite see, but this flange is dead flat. Now, I did tighten it as tight as I could, but you can still ever so slightly rotate the wastegate with enough force. Inside of this flange here, there's going to be a fire ring that ends up sealing the valve on the bottom of this wastegate. Now, when we put smoke right here where the turbo is, it ends up leaking right through this flange here, so a manifold to wastegate, and then from inside here, that flange to the dump tube. We ended up moving it up and around here just to test it and smoke it, but of course it's leaking right through this clamp here for whatever reason and right through here. I don't quite know what the solution is going to be, so right now I was hoping to have it done for the weekend and have the front end put on, but I have a feeling it's going to be a few day hiatus or whatever you want to call it. I don't know if I need to take the flange off to have that little portion machined down so it doesn't leak. Try and get some ghetto ingenuity. I don't know what's going to be needed for the wastegate, but it's going to take a little bit more time, and we'll see what the solution is. I don't know, maybe a skimmy gasket maker. That's the first thing that comes to mind, but I'm a little bit ghetto in that sense. I guess we're going to see.
Yep, as some of you guessed it, my ghetto ingenuity ended up getting the better of me, and I layered this MFer with the thickest layer of copper RTV. I asked 013 what they thought, and of course they said the same thing. They put a thick layer of RTV as well and send it home. For the wastegate portion, it ends up getting a little more complicated. There's a few more details that you need to keep in mind. These two fire rings, the shiny one is a brand new one, and the one that looks a bit weathered is the used one. I wasn't completely set on the finish, so what I ended up doing is I took the fire ring and I gave it a bidirectional finish with my orbital palm sounder, and this is what it looks like afterwards. This should seal a lot better against the manifold. When the fire ring sits just inside of the wastegate, when you end up clamping it onto the manifold itself, it's meant to push the fire ring against the valve. Now, when we go to mount it onto the manifold itself, it's leaking both through the V-band clamp and through the fire ring out of the downpipe, or I guess you could say the screamer pipe. Easiest way for us to fix it, yep, you guessed it again, a nice skim of copper RTV, both on the fire ring and onto the faces of each flange, bottom of the fire ring and the bottom of the wastegate. After we get it into place and we snug it down, we're going to let it cure for the 24 hours that's recommended on the packaging. I didn't want to induce any oil because of the actual smoke test, so we left it be and just made sure that everything was okay. We came back the next day and of course it doesn't leak, and that put a smile on my face because this is something that I've been dealing with for some time now and I didn't want to be dealing with it anymore. After struggling with the wastegate, I move over to simple things. I didn't want to pull the entire washer tube out, so I just wrap it quickly with some gold reflective tape and zip tie the ends. We're going to be moving on to mounting the turbo for its final time and clocking it for the outlet. Tradition would have it, every time you mount a turbo, you need to give that little billet spoolie boy a little spinny spin. Whee! This is where the aggravation really started to set in. Everything started to look good and started to come together, but as soon as we started mounting the charge pipe is when we started to realize The fitment was absolute garbage, and the tolerances are so razor thin. We end up mounting the upper coolant hose, and it seemed to work, but it kind of puts tension on the charge pipe. Here you can see how close everything sat. If it wasn't within 1 or 2 millimeter tolerance, it was just sitting right against one another. We decided to move past the charge pipe and all that. I figured I would deal with it later. We ended up going to install the radiator, the AC condenser, and the power steering cooler. After we end up having those satisfying clicks of all the hoses and lines getting clipped in, we end up moving forward to fitting the intercooler. Of course, this intercooler is massive, and we needed to give a little bit of clearancing because we didn't want to leave it for self-clearancing. So we pull out the Dremel, we end up giving it a little bit more room and go to reinstall the intercooler itself. What I do recommend with this intercooler, because I have a bunch of the factory transmission pan bolts with the wide head available, when you use these and you tap them into the plastic housing, they go further in, and the wide head ensures that the intercooler is going to be held properly without breaking off. Next, we put on the rad support. You need to make sure that the plastic on either side you end up trimming. Because the chunky boy needs a lot of room, we end up having to trim it a few times, but once it clears, you can throw the bolts in and you're ready to go. Keeping with the theme, we're throwing in the rad fan, and surprise, surprise, nothing fits. You can see the little doggo running around. That's going to be the only solace in this little clip. I thought that it was going to end up working, so I decided to take the port off of the blow-off valve. Still didn't work. Hit the AC line, and it was being a nuisance. To an extent, I threw in the towel, loosened the entire front end, and tipped it forward so that I could finally wheel it in and pass the blow-off valve. Afterwards, I started to see a light at the end of the tunnel. I moved over to the DME and I started to replace it. It's good to, when you take things like this apart, to take photos just to ensure that you know which way it goes. I can't say that I have a decent memory, but you know what? It really wasn't all that bad. After reviewing and doing a voiceover for the majority of this video, I'm glad to realize that the PTSD is not going to set in. We're going to end up replacing the front bumper, and I really can't believe I'm at this point.
It's been 84 long years, but the vehicle is at its state. I've got good news and bad news for you. Good news is vehicle's like 95% done. Bad news is we're waiting for the transmission cooler adapter from CanTCU. We can't start it without the CanTCU adapter, so we need to wait for that adapter to throw it in to fill the transmission, and then eventually, after Ken from Kenformance has programmed the vehicle, then we can start it. So there's a little bit left, but I'll give you a rundown as to what the car looks like right now. This intake manifold, I believe, again, it's the BMP one, was absolutely awful to install. As you can see, we ended up needing to use, I believe they're 1.5-inch standoffs here for the coolant reservoir. I wanted to use the 335 diesel coolant reservoir, but in turn, it needed to be lifted so that this hose kind of goes up and around to the upper rad hose. The charge pipe itself, the clip is going to be extremely tight because everything is all sandwiched and wedged. You can't see underneath there, or maybe you can. You have one coolant hose way down here that's resting right against the charge pipe itself, and the one up top here. It should be okay. It might be okay. I'm not sure. I had to make this one bracket to hold the power steering reservoir. I got it to look relatively okay, and it fits. Now, I have a 335 diesel one off for an E90. It doesn't fit. What I didn't realize is the 1 Series has one single hood latch, and these two pieces, it's not the filler piece like you would have on the E90 or 92. It's 2 individual ones and 4 screws. So for obvious reasons, I had to reuse the factory one, and it does sit up quite a bit. So all I did in the meantime is chopped it here, and it looks fine. I opted to go with the 335 oil cooler lines for 2 reasons. One, I didn't really like how it kind of looped up and over, and 2, mine were a bit crusty. So I borrowed these off a spare motor from a buddy. They go into the factory 135 cooler. Now I tried to change the cooler itself. If you can see it there, I tried to change the cooler with a 335 gas motor. Doesn't fit. So the only part that actually fits is the upper coolant, or sorry, the upper oil hoses, cooler hoses. Anyways, you know what I'm getting at. Small things like the CTS I think it's called the Be Cool cap, whatever. There's clearance issues with the PR coils, so I took the bracket off and bent them up maybe 10 degrees so that you can see here they just clear. Now if I go to change the filter, I may need to take the two 10mm bolts out, move the coil, and then access the filter. Not the end of the world. Two catch cans, of course they're hidden in behind this monstrosity of wiring. The low side, which is a Mishimoto style, along with buried inside here, a BMS style catch can. So that's the high side, that's the low side, and this is venting the rear can. Up and behind here, under the wiring, if you can see, we have the PCV, factory PCV flapper right here. That goes to the silicone hose, which goes over to the catch can, and then the low side, right inside here, is the RB PCV valve that integrates a Toyota Super pump. Or sorry, Toyota Super PCV. So that little smaller silicone hose goes to the Mishimoto can, and then the out from that to the evap line, which ultimately goes to the throttle body. Here I found a bracket. I'm not sure exactly what it was for, but I repurposed it for the MAC valve. I ended up hot gluing the MAC valve in place. The two lines here that are going to the heat loom go down to the wastegate. So there's high and low. In behind here, you can't see, but this line and this line here go to a T-piece. So you have here, which I believe is the front of the turbo, and then MAC valve, and the other one goes to the wastegate. So this is plumbed correctly. The wiring's hidden up and over here. It's peeking out just in behind here, but I have it run just like factory. This will ultimately live there, and one of these pressure converter lines will reach in behind here. There. So there's a little bit of work to do. Downpipe fits, we're converting a single bank. So this bolt here, or this nut, whatever we're gonna call it, this is where the primary O2 sensor is gonna be housed and the secondary is gonna be near the bottom. So I need to wire that. Otherwise, it's looking pretty good. Oh my God, it's here. It's here, it's here, it's here. It's here, hi doggo. It's here, come here. It's here. If you saw in the last episode, we were waiting on some pieces from CanTCU, and they've arrived. So we're pretty excited for this because now we can finish our 1 Series project. Hopefully everything fits properly. Whenever you're doing aftermarket stuff, it's kind of a who knows, but I'm excited. So I'm going to rip it open and see if we can actually get the 1 Series started. Hopefully. I'm going to give you guys a bit of a rundown as to what we received here. You got your little accessory bag. I can only imagine that's for the shifter surround. We have the plug and play harness. That one's for the E8/9X plug and play. This should be all that's really required. And of course this one here, it's going to plug in line with the factory one. So you have the one where it goes into the mechatronic sleeve there and factory harness. That likely utilizes the factory grounding. This is a new product from CanFormance, is the oil cooler adapter. This one in particular is the 6HP. 6HP to 8HP version B. Depending on what version you have inside of your vehicle, this one will actually match so you can utilize your 6HP oil cooler. Nice little lanyard. Actually, that's a really nice one. We have the beer koozie here. If you need to keep your delicate gloved hands off of your cold items of choice or beverage of choice. And then we have the CanTCU. This one here, you see you get the computer itself, and you do get here some pins and the OBD connector and a proprietary cable. Okay. The actual computer itself, so that connector plugs into the back here. Now, that cable that I just showed you will plug into here. So if we end up spinning this open, and I can't do it with one hand, you'll see there's just a little port here for the USB connector. When you're going to make any flashes, this is what you're going to be flashing, because this will be essentially the TCU to control the CanFormance, or to control the transmission. So let's just chuck it all back here so nothing gets damaged. We'll close up the box. We're going to throw this into this. And start it.
We're running the plug and play CanTCU harness, so a little bit different than the one that we did on the E92. It's kind of a little bit more revised, a lot more simplistic. Nice proprietary 3D printed housing for the adapter. So this will go into the 8 HP. This will go into the old 6 HP. No more need to run a power wire or a ground. And then things are cut to separate lengths. So running up the tunnel, we'll have both of these running into the vehicle. This will be CanTCU. This will be going to the OBD2. And then on a separate length, we have the ones for the shifter. So this is how we're gonna run it. Be nice, simplistic, super easy. Everything's already pre-labeled, telling you where it goes. And I'm gonna start running it through the trans tunnel now. So we ran the harnesses through the port back here that would originally be for the locking mechanism or the shifter, because it was not electronically done, it was manually done. I ran the wires here just for the shifter. Everything's already beautifully labeled. And then I fed the other wires, one for OBD, one for CanTCU, just through the side portion here without disassembling the center console. I'll run it up the back and then in through the glove box and mount it back here in the glove box.
Gonna give you guys a bit of a recap while Taylor's inside with Ken from CanTCU. Oh crap, it went to sleep. I guess I should have left that open. Okay, we're good. So Taylor's over here with Ken from Ken Performance to flash the CanTCU. This is kind of what we did with the shifter. I haven't shown you since because this has all happened after. Okay, BMW, chill. Okay, we know you don't have a transmission apparently. This here is the F22, so that's out of a 230 BMW that had the 8 HP. Taylor's dumb face over here, I don't know what he's doing, his laptop. We opted to put the controller right over top here in the glove box. That was the easiest way. With the plug and play harness, Taylor had run it through where the factory linkage, I think, comes through the chassis. So right through here, he routed it up and around to the glove box. Taylor did half okay on that. I'll give him a good job sticker. I don't believe I had explained what this is here. This is a wrist racing exhaust. So it's gonna look very, very stock, but it is a single 3-inch exhaust. These will come at a later date. Over here, the engine bay. I'll give you just a quick recap of everything here. The MAC valve we have routed up and tucked just in behind here. Now the boost control solenoid, I'm relying on Taylor to have told me correct information that you could use either one, so we opted to use the longer one. Now because we're running single bank fueling, what we needed to be cautious of is the O2 sensors that we used. Now the primary ones, I simply use this one because the shielding was black silicone and it hides away. But the connectors themselves that are tucked underneath the intake manifold, those are not keyed. The ones that are keyed are the actual ones under the car. So the ones under the car, if you're looking at it and the front of the vehicle is here, you're gonna use the one on the left. I believe it has a green band. That's for the primary bank 1, sensor 2. Yes. The one crucial piece that we were waiting for was the adapter. We installed the adapter. Now there was a slight machining issue where the wrong size bolt was provided. So you need, instead of an M6 bolt, you need to use an M8 bolt. And I think it's about a 1-inch, whatever in length. You need to use the M8 bolt and you just need to open up the oval just a hair. So we took a Dremel with a carbide bit. We opened it a bit of a hair, a little bit of a chamfer. It looks nice. That's all that was needed. Make sure that you have slack on the lines when you go to tighten them in because it will try to pull it into the port. So loosen the front and the side. You can pull tension on it as you're tightening it down and you're good to go. The Allen key was, I believe, a 5mm Allen key. If you have a spare one or a sacrificial one, cut off about a 1/2 inch and it'll make it a lot easier for you to actually tighten it. For the vehicle, It is holding fluids, knock on wood. We did fill the power steering here. We did fill the coolant. We did fill the engine oil, and the transmission currently has 4 liters of ATF. Now with an 8-speed, a nice trick that I knew and Taylor learned is it'll only take 4 liters initially until you start the vehicle. But when you do something like this, especially if there's fluid that had leaked out of the torque converter, or if it was a new torque converter, or all fluid was out of the torque converter, once it started, you need to raise the RPM to about 2000 RPM for 30-40 seconds. And what that's essentially going to do is it's going to fill the torque converter. So after you do that, run through the gears. BMW says run through them once. So you're going to use your Prindle thing. So from park, reverse, wait a few seconds, neutral, wait a few seconds, drive, wait a few seconds, sport, a few seconds. And from there, just go through the gears, fluid, every maybe half second or a second, just to bleed all the solenoids. Do it a second time and all the way back. D, neutral, R, P. Why didn't I say N? Whatever. Now I do that twice, and afterwards just fill it until it pours out. I personally do not wait until it ends up reaching optimum temperature, 40 degrees, whatever it is. As soon as you're done that process, just fill it. You're gonna fill it probably 700 mil over. It's perfectly fine. It actually has a few benefits, but that's not this kind of video. One thing to remember, I'm going to show you through here, is when you're doing something like this, especially putting a new motor in, make sure you disconnect the injectors or the injector clips off of the injectors, because this was refresh, the oil lines have no oil, the cooler has no oil. You need to ensure that those are disconnected so that you can properly prime the engine. BMW states you're going to cycle the ignition 3 times, trying to start it for 10 seconds. So first crank 10 seconds, let it cool for 30 seconds after so the starter doesn't burn. Another 10 seconds, 30-second cool off. Another 10 seconds, 30-second cool off. And what they say is at that point, you can start checking for oil leaks, because this will have enough oil for the turbo. So we did inject a little bit of oil initially, but this will have its prime. The oil cooler will have its prime, the housing will have its prime, and then the filter will be saturated in oil. Now I may do it 4 times because that's how I am, but whatever. We're gonna go over to Taylor to see what he's doing here with Ken. Looks like he's still doing his thing through TeamView. He's sleeping?
No.
We're gonna finish the flash, and as soon as we're done getting this thing ready, we're gonna come back to you and see what happens. I'm nervous. I'm nervous as hell. My stomach is all in like a knot. Yeah. Okay.
Good?
Yep. What was knocking? Can I do it again? 10 seconds.
It won't let me. It cuts itself out.
It's cutting out.
Yeah. Mine does the same thing. It only lets it go for like 3-4 seconds.
Why?
I don't know.
Well, all that cranking and no oils come up.
Do you want me to scan it and see if it's telling me anything, or?
Mm-hmm. We are getting no oil pressure. I don't know what that clumping is. We have oil pressure.
Temp sensor, junk, doesn't matter.
Oh, it's because it doesn't have JB4 or the back-end firmware.
Yeah. Intake vanos, exhaust vanos, crankshaft inlet, camshaft synchronization.
What? JB4 is not installed and we're getting a bunch of codes, but the inlet crankshaft one is a bit alarming. Only because that would be the timing off. Yeah, the timing would be off. Well, we're going to install JB4, delete the codes, and crank again. Well, we're at that time where we're going to crank it a second time. We've updated the firmware on the JB4 to the single turbo firmware. I purchased the back-end flasher license for the MHD. So we have flashed it with the JB4 single turbo back-end flash for the IJ EOS or whatever it is. And then we went back into the JB4 to adjust all of the finer tune settings, put it on map 1 kind of thing. So it'll be relatively just wastegate pressure. Fuel pressure is holding. And all we're gonna do is we're just gonna crank it and make sure the fuel oil pressure is up, and then it's the moment of truth. It's cranking over strong. Good thing is right now we have 153-624. Now those of you that may not know, that's the actual firing order of the N54. So along with those, my foolish behind has left the outside temp sensor disconnected, so it thinks it's -40. If this was a month ago, spot on. I wouldn't know that it was disconnected, but here we are. One more.
It's got great oil pressure.
It's got good compression too. Yeah,
Like-
codes are the same.
I'm watching your oil cooler hoses, and they're like this,
They're
and then
flexing?
you crank it, and it's like,
Good, yeah. I'm gonna get some Pepto to settle my nervous stomach, and when I'm back, we're gonna plug in the injectors. Actually, I think that's what Taylor's probably doing right now. Is that what you're doing?
yep.
And we're gonna tighten the downpipe, and it's a moment's truth. It's the witching hour. Taylor's gonna fire it up now that we've primed it more than enough times, and with the trusty help of Sharp Eye Sean over here, we're gonna keep an eye on, make sure that it's not pissing vitals anywhere. Ready?
Yep. You good?
Pray to whoever you're praying to.
I'm going.
Okay. Okay.
Gonna fill up the rail.
Ready?
Sure.
Yep.
That's pretty uneventful. That's a good thing.
So far, so good. How's it look so far?
Like a sewing machine.
Give it a couple of revs. Again?
Oil light came on. Yeah, just engine oil level at minimum, so it probably just needs a bit of oil. Very uneventful.
Very
like a sewing machine.
Uneventful.
It's fine. You know what? It's fine that it's uneventful, honestly.
No, that's what you want.
Like-
yeah. I was actually expecting way more like hiccuping and everything like that, considering we reset adaptations and everything. It was
That's-
goofy for the first 10 seconds, and that was it.
I didn't expect it to sound as good as it does. Now, a couple things we'll obviously need to check, because once it's bled, then I'll see what screeching noise is going on. But being that the pump was empty and we had to top up the power steering fluid, there's a good chance it's just a little bit pissed off or annoyed power steering pump. What I think we're gonna do is heat cycle it, get it a little bit warmer, get the coolant temps up just a hair, and double check all the bolts and whatnot. I'll put the shields and so forth on, and then hopefully take it for a test drive, and we will report back. And we're back. Last you guys had seen, we started the vehicle. We gave it a quick rundown to make sure that there were no major issues, I guess, no major leaks. Fortunately, no leaks. Since then, we've done some little things that I'm going to show you really quick. Underneath, we put all the skid plates back. We put the brace back. It does have the rear muffler in for now. It's sort of a temporary thing. In the meantime, since I couldn't get the whole exhaust work done to match it to the rest of the exhaust, we may be running open downpipe. So I did get a turn down and some V-bands welded. So it'll work from now, but at least I won't be able to blow a hole into the trans pan because it's blowing hot air, hot heat, whatever on it. And I won't burn the floor pan. We put the cowl back in here. I did take the scoops out because I don't want it to be spraying water on my brand new-ish, freshly rebuilt alternator. All of this is complete. The harness is zip tied up and away. That's the best it's gonna get. Maybe I'll put the cowl on, probably not. Other than that, we do have a temporary filter. This filter is all I could get in the limited time that I had. We have the turbo blanket here and the downpipe. All of this is relatively good. I don't think that it's going to be an issue where it comes to heat. Eventually I will put the engine cover on and it is ready for its maiden voyage. We took the car off the quick jack, so it is on the ground. We did torque the wheels. We got rid of the useless lock nuts or bolts, whatever. We checked the tire pressure. It's ready to go. So we're going to shut the hood, fire it up, let it idle for a bit, and we're going to learn the diff ratio through the CanTCU. So Taylor and I are going to jump in. He's going to fire up the laptop, and we're going to go on its first drive. We already have a transmission malfunction. That didn't last long. As soon as we go to drive, it throws a transmission malfunction. So we're just trying to figure it out.
All right, give that a go.
I can't tell if it's echoing or vibrating something.
Fuck, you can hear those brakes.
Yeah, it looks like it's just blowing up dust.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. Wait till the gate opens and you should see the dust. So look at that curve. They're both perfectly aligned.
What does that mean?
That it's learning the diff perfectly.
Yeah, so far I don't see anything crazy out the back, and I don't see anything coming out the engine bay.
Nope.
I think the...
See if you can build a little boost. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's already building boost?
Yeah. Okay, diff's learned. Everything's following mid. Go to sport.
Oh, what is with the vibration?
Flat spots on the wheels.
No, is that like... Oh, it might be. I thought that was because of the RPM. Maybe not. So I guess I'll get Taylor to give you a bit of rundown as to what we're doing, because when you do an 8-speed swap, this is something that you're going to need to do. All right, Taylor, what are we doing?
So you gotta...
Sorry.
I don't even know if you'll be able to talk. Do you want me to just talk while we watch the car?
Yeah, maybe.
That might be best. So what we did is I just had Tony drive around. We tried to maintain kind of a constant speed. So above 50 is ideal. We matched DS calculated RPM as well as TCU input RPM. You want those to be within 15 RPMs of each other. Closer the better. Best way to, or the correct way to do that is you're gonna have somebody like me sitting in the side, or if you're by yourself, just go to real time, hit record, look at a data log, and match them up. If you need to make some adjustments, you can go to the speed correction factor under configuration on CanTCU, and that's where you'll be able to adjust all that. So if DS calculated RPM is less than the TCU, you need to decrease the speed correction. And if it is the other way, so DS calculated is bigger than TCU output, you need to increase the speed correction. Chef's kiss.
If somebody asks, I'm going to tell them somebody cut my cat out.
So engine oil temp staying perfect.
Yeah, it's actually registering here.
Yeah, and water temp is staying perfect. It's dropping. So it got up to 104 and then it went back down to 96. Now it's at 98 sitting at a light.
Low pressure is 65. I think that's good.
That's normal-ish.
Let's give it a little bit of gas.
It's like a tease. That was only 3 pounds.
And we're back. If I didn't say that was a bit nerve-wracking, I would be lying, but here we are. The vehicle made it in one piece. I was gonna say the kid, we'll call him the kid, whatever. He went over it really quick. He couldn't really see a whole lot. Yeah, success. The only thing that we need to do in the immediate is just tighten the oil feed line. It's sweating just a hair, but it's just a 13 mil. We'll give it an extra little snug. Once it cools down, then we should be good. I really expected that there was going to be something a little more obvious that would have been a bit of an issue, but it wasn't. And it's weird because that's not normally how my luck works. So maybe I'm just trading in all those chits or whatever for decent luck. But you know what? I'll take it. It works good. It's obviously really loud right now, but we will be getting the rest of the exhaust done in 1 week's time. So this is temporary. It's loud, it's obnoxious, it's very hot boy spec. My neighbor approves. It's a little too much for me. In today's episode, we're gonna be working on the 1 Series. We took it out for some data logging. We ended up running into some small issues. I'll insert some clips here.
Should I need 3rd gear or 4th?
Let's try a 4th probably. You're not gonna get traction in 3rd.
Ready?
Yeah, if I yell at you, let off.
Okay.
Long story short, the car was running out of fuel or fuel pump, so it's pretty efficient in making some good power. This is the data log that we ended up having on the day in question, and yeah, without a doubt, it's losing fuel pressure. We're gonna show you the upgrade that we're gonna be doing today, and yeah, so stay tuned, we're gonna get at it.
So Tony got blue balled by the car, finally went out, data logged, got to 9 pounds. He was happy. It was okay. Things were going good. Went to go to map 2. Bam! Low pressure for the fuel. So now we have a Walbro 450 that we're going to throw in there. Just to go a little bit not as ghetto, we are using the BMP plug and play fittings just to ensure no leaks. Kind of take the ghetto-ness out of it. We're just going to DIY a pump.
Basically, this fitting, what it's going to do is it's going to go right onto the top of the fuel pump here. So it's going to keep a tight radius, a tight 90-degree radius to a hose. Reason being is we're going to be retaining not only the factory bucket for the Venturi, but we're going to be retaining the factory top hat. You can get away sometimes with the hose if it comes off and you make a tight bend or an S or whatever. There's no point doing that. You could end up putting it in, it could crush. So using the BMP fitting is ideal. And we're going to use this Fat Boy fuel pump here from, it says TI Automotive, but I'm led to believe it's a Walbro. It's made in USA. It smells like freedom. The plan of attack is we're going to install some freedom into the fuel pump bucket and then let the German, I was going to say bald horses, but the German Clydesdales? Horses? German horses? Yes. We're going to let the horses free and hopefully make 20 pounds on pump gas with our peasant fuel.
We're gonna pull apart the factory fuel pump. This is just a spare that we had laying around. We still have the factory one in the car. Right here, you can see you have a little bit of flexibility in between. Where it starts getting tight is where it's stuck together. I already popped one. You're just follow around. As you see it get tight, we're gonna heat it up with a heat gun, apply a little bit of pressure to pull it apart. And that'll allow us to pull this piece out. We're gonna retain this piece. We'll throw it back in afterwards. And then on the inside, we also have a centering bracket. Same thing, it's gonna be glued, and we'll show you when we get there. Same process, we're just gonna heat it up with a heat gun, pry it out, and then when it comes to reassembly, zip ties are actually really fuel resistant, so we'll just zip tie it back in place.
I like how you... Son of a... How the f did I break it with a plastic pry bar?
Tony, tensile strength.
We got the pump out. I accidentally broke a corner of the actual bucket out. It's not going to be the end of the world. What I might end up doing is get my sacrificial soldering iron and plastic weld it a little bit. This is going to be generally high density polyethylene, so although it's strong, it can still break. What I found that helped me quite a bit is heat up where the sides of the fuel pump bracket attach to the bucket here. So as you can see from here, attaches here. And what I did is I took a flathead, I worked it into the corner, so just wiggle it into the corner, and then eventually you can start to kind of rock it a bit to where it loosens up. I took a pry tool, I put it inside there. Eventually it will crack and break free. Crack is scary, but it ended up working out pretty good.
While Tony rebuilds the bucket back together with plastic, we're just taking the old piece off here. So it's kind of like push tabs that you've seen everywhere else. One here, one here, one here. You're gonna get two over and then kind of just wiggle the pry tool in there. If my hand stops shaking, and gently push it over. Then it'll slide on. I'm just gonna slide it all the way to the bottom to make sure we don't have any movement in the pump. So that's all we're gonna do for that. We will put the filter on, snip this so we can plug it back to the factory plugs. A couple other things to do still, but this is getting closer to be ready to go back in.
Taylor was mentioning that when we go to reinstall it, the biggest thing is you're gonna want this to sit as low as possible. Reason being is the factory pump here, or actually if we put it next to this one, you can see where the top of the pump is here, as opposed to the new Waldro. If it doesn't go without saying, we can't have it sitting further up where it would normally be, and this pump is a tiny bit smaller. Now, when you end up getting rid of the factory pump, you get rid of this little Venturi thing. We're not completely certain on what it does or the benefits from it, but most of these aftermarket pumps end up getting rid of it. So for this harness, because this pump is dead, we're gonna cut it longer. We're gonna chuck this in the garbage.
So because this has a bigger strainer than the factory one, which kind of sat upwards and into the pump, you need to cut this out a little bit to make room for it. It's gonna make it a lot easier to put the pump in. Easy way to do it is kind of take just regular electrical tape. The thickness of the electrical tape is where you're gonna cut. So we're gonna cut along here on the top, down in a bit of a pie to level it out with a small piece at the bottom. And we're just gonna cut the thickness of the electrical tape to make it
Are we getting
easier.
rid of this?
Yes, so just around the outside of this to get rid of it.
For those of you that don't know what this is essentially like a one-way. So on the inside, you see that little bit of a grommet. Now what that does is in the event that the bucket is running a bit lower, you're a little bit low on fuel, this will move when the fuel is sloshed to ensure that there's a little bit in the bucket. And then in the event you end up driving a little bit harder, you'll always have a tiny bit of fuel in the bottom. I don't know if Taylor knows what it smells like to be burning electrical tape, so after you listen to Taylor and outline it with electrical tape, listen to Tony, who's done this for way too long, and peel that off so you don't assault your brain cells with chemical. After you've cut it and burned your arm from all the molten plastic, this should relatively easily pop out. This would be a bit of a transition in between bucketed and bucketless, only because you've actually modified the bucket. So you're retaining, I would say, a decent portion of the bucket, but for obvious reasons, so that the strainer fits, we needed to modify it. Last thing we ended up doing was trimming it out, and then we just trimmed a little notch here for the bottom of the fuel pump where the filter is. Now, the one thing to keep in mind is this little retainer lock nut thing. This will be a bit of a pain. So all we did is we took a 5mm socket, give it a little bit of pressure, and it'll usually go on to the nub, and give it a little tap and you're good. Now, the way we decided to orientate, as Taylor would say, this pump is there's the 3 feet here. So the longest one we ended up putting towards this portion right there. So when you go to actually wedge it in, you'll put the 1 foot just underneath, make sure that the strainer doesn't get caught on anything, and then slowly walk the other 2 ears in. Now the reason we ended up cutting the notch is because when we go to put it in there, that's where the bottom part is gonna sit. When you put it in, this little triangle piece, you're gonna wanna work it all the way down, because that's what's actually gonna be holding the pump in place. So work it all the way down, and then you'll see that it's gonna sit right in the ridge, or right in the notch, and then you're gonna have a stable fuel pump. Next step, I'm gonna use a light so you guys can see it a little bit better, or at least from the inside. You can see the shadow of that post there that's holding the fuel pump. It's right about here. You could use some type of adhesive or epoxy to affix it the way it was prior. What I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to drill 2 little holes so that we can route a zip tie through it, pull it taut, and should be good. We ended up with the drill and zip tie method. So you can see my first failed attempt. Turns out when you end up drilling a hole, you'll end up getting it, but as soon as you try to walk it up, it'll push the whole thing up. We'll move on to a nicer side so you can slowly or very lightly see the outline of the triangle portion on that side, and same with that. Now the zip ties, they're not going to be in anything's way, but you can see where on the inside, they're going to end up holding the fuel pump quite taut. We're going to put this back on top. I believe it goes something like that. We're going to crimp the old connector on. So if you didn't see, on the sacrificial pump, we have the factory connector here. Once we get it in there, we will take it for a data log, and we will show you guys the difference between a big pump and a tired OEM pump. Installing the pump wasn't all that bad. If you've ever replaced a fuel pump in the past, or if you have a slight amount of mechanical knowledge, and as long as you disconnect the battery, you should be good to go. We had to reinvent the wheel just a hair, so we ended up having to cut the zip ties because they were sticking out a bit too far, and just put the zip ties on the inside. I ended up plastic welding the cap back on, so just cut it with a zip tie and redid it. Food for thought, just make sure that the zip ties you use are going to be strong enough that they're not going to loosen up over time with a little bit of vibration, and you should be good to go. Anytime you end up opening the fuel system, you're going to need to prime it. So what I would generally recommend and do on most of my project vehicles is cycle the ignition a couple of times. 2-3 times should be enough. You'll generally hear where the fuel pump is starting to push fuel up into the line, because you will end up having some air pockets. It will start to sound different. After 2 or 3 primes, you should be good to go. Then you can fire it up. It might burp a little bit or hesitate a little bit as it's warming up, but it's simply just working out all the air bubbles that you've now induced into the fuel line. We took it out last night for some pulls and some data logs. We're gonna show you the clips right now. Ready?
Yep. Woo! No, 16 pounds, you had 60-something pounds of fuel pressure. So fuel pump is doing fuel pump thingies.
That was quick. Holy shit. That's only 16.
Yeah, hit the gas. I just want to make sure it's not sticking. Yep. Yep.
As soon as I confirm this part. There we go.
You hear it?
What?
During shift?
Ready?
Yep.
As a reminder, here's what the fueling looked like previous on the stock pump. Here's what it looks like with the upgraded Marlboro 450. As you can see, it's going to have a lot more fuel pressure up top. It's not going to be dropping off normally. And once we end up dialing it in and have the trims appropriate, we should be good to go to turn it up a little bit more. We're hoping for about 20 pounds on pump gas, and I think this pump's going to be well within our limits. 7 months ago, I bought this 135i BMW, and this is what it looked like and sounded like back then. And this is what it sounds like now. Yeah, a little bit of a difference, I would say. It's been a hell of a journey, but I think the result is pretty good. The goal was to build a 700 horsepower N54 1 series for under about $10,000 US. And again, not Canadian pesos, proper 10,000 American dollars. Yeah. I guess it's time to tell if we've stayed within budget or if I failed miserably. I tried very hard not to add up the numbers to see how much I had spent on it, but we'll begin. Now, keep in mind, I'll give you all the numbers in Canadian dollars, and we'll give you a bit of a breakdown. I think we'll put it on the screen just so we can tally it. It'll be in Canadian pesos, and eventually we'll convert it and see how we stacked up to our budget goal. We're going to start with vehicle purchase price because you're obviously going to need a vehicle to build. Vehicle purchase price, $5,000. Now that being said, I got a bit of a breakdown. I did end up getting VIV 17T turbos. I got charge pipe, blow-off valves, the factory dual cooling intakes, and there was a couple other small little things. After selling that, the vehicle purchase price was $2,300 Canadian. Believe it or not, a 2009 135i, full M Sport, everything with the big Brembos, $2,300. So we're off to a good start. But looking at these numbers, it gets a little bit rough. 0.3 single turbo kit. So this big old spoolie boy here. Now, for obvious reasons, I needed to get all the trimmings. So it's the 6466 with the, I believe it's the billet wheel and the triple ceramic ball bearing or dual ceramic ball bearing. Anyways, the turbo kit, shipped, landed, duty brokerage, all of the fun stuff, $4,315.06. So I did get a bit lucky because ON3 ended up having this on sale. I think they were hawking them off or 50% off or clearance or whatever. So it ended up working. Next up, most of you will not believe it, but the 8 HP 45 rear wheel drive with the oil cooler I didn't use, the F22, so I'd have a 2 Series shifter and a donated torque converter came to $200. Yes, that's right. I happen to score the 8 HP 45, including shifter and other stuff, for $200. Buddy of mine sold it. I had no idea it was going to fit. Sat in the corner of the garage, and ironically, I think that's what kind of the snowball effect happened, and this is the result. But yeah, $200. Great, hey? Big dollar ticket item, CanTCU controller kit. Now that will include the controller, the DIY harness, the connectors, essentially everything that you needed to do. That was $1,749.75. Yeah, a bit of a sting, but that's okay. The transmission adapter. So now we're going from the 6 HP to the 8 HP transmission. I believe it's 10 or 11 mil for the 6 HP to adapt the factory cooler, which we decided to go, or that was the best course of action, to the 17 mil ports or 18, anyways, whatever. I'm not good with numbers. On the 8 HP, that adapter, shipped, landed, everything, $95.34. Replacement N54 engine. So this that's freaking hot. This bad boy here, the factory engine, if you've watched the previous videos, it ended up eating a few steel bits, chomped on them good, destroyed the front turbo, and put tons of metal throughout. Couldn't trust that motor, and I didn't feel like rebuilding it in the middle of winter, so we ditched that idea. Replacement engine. Now, it did have a bit of a weepy valve seal, so the wrecker that sold it to us did give us some money back, but shipped and landed $1,415.64. Not bad, hey? Not bad. Now, bear in mind, we did have to refresh and reseal the engine, so that will come shortly here. BMS, we had a miscellaneous order. Now, I can't remember exactly what that was. I think it was diff brace and other small items, including the filter. $121.03. Okay, not bad. For the seals and whatnot from FCP Euro, $299.31. So far, so good. Rock Auto, miscellaneous orders, because some things you can get from other places for cheaper and it's the same part. $591.69. Now for the Rock Auto, that'll end up being the miscellaneous items that I didn't get at FCP. So essentially, we refreshed the majority of it. A handful of the items would be like oil filter housing, gaskets, seals. FCP was the only place to get the O-rings for the oil cooler and other items like exhaust gaskets and so forth. All the smaller things. 335 diesel tank, yeah, that nice bit of plastic there. It accounts for all of those items. Now, bigger items. PR coils, forward-facing manifold. We have the dock race forward-facing charge pipe. We have the tile blow-off valve. We have the fuel rail for the port. We have the injectors and the controller. came to a whopping 1,700 Canadian dollars. Now I rounded up, it was like $16.99 and change, but that works. Walbro 450, including the fittings and everything needed. So as you probably saw in the other video, if you stuck around for a while, we decided to modify the factory bucket on the cheap. Walbro 450 with fittings, $274.63. Not bad. 8 HP 45 transmission pen, since the factory one had a crack in it and it has the integrated filter. And oh yeah, by the way, the transmission and everything associated only had 41,000 kilometers. Yeah, $200 is pretty good. 8 HP 45 pan, filter, bolts, fluid, $227.68. Now the exhaust, I didn't want to use the factory exhaust because we wanted to upgrade with a single turbo. Generally, you'll have a 3-inch all the way back so it doesn't end up splitting into two. I went with a used RIS Racing capback, which is 3-inch to a full-size muffler. $300 used. Pretty good. Miscellaneous fluids, 108.36, so that'll end up being engine coolant, power steering fluid, and whatever else that I didn't need, distilled water, small things. Miscellaneous hose and fittings. So for example, the blue silicone hoses and whatnot for the catch can, hoses for the blow-off valve, for the MAC valve, and so forth. That is $73.85. Catch cans high and low. I remembered these and they didn't really stick out anywhere. So the low side, which is a Mishimoto knockoff, high side, which is a BMS maybe knockoff, I can't remember, $74.48. Getting near the bottom of the list, the 18-inch work wheels. They're definitely used, but they're in excellent shape that I got off a buddy of mine. They did include tires. Now, these aren't necessary to make the 700 horsepower, but it looks pretty damn good. Those were $1,000. Now that is everything in a nutshell. Now bear in mind that there are many used parts that I can sell. I have spare high pressure fuel pumps. I have all the miscellaneous items. Generally I've been donating them to friends, but I can sell the bigger ticket items and I may get $500 to $1,000 back. But at the end of it, the factory engine, now this amount won't account for the factory engine, but I have somebody committed to buying the factory engine for $3,500 and I will be into it for about $500 in gaskets, rod bearings, and so forth. So I will refresh it and I will be selling it for $3,500. So I put about a $3,000 price tag ticket on that and should work out pretty good. Now bear in mind, this does not account for labor. I am that glutton for punishment where I can do it myself, but yeah, a lot of you can't, and I do recommend just at least try it and watch our videos, and if it helps give you a little bit of motivation, great, because that's how I started. Totaling everything comes to $13,846.82. That's Canadian. USD, total $10,127.57. I missed it by 127 bucks. Those wheels definitely pushed it over budget, but it's worth it. I'm not gonna fudge numbers to make it look like we scored and made it work, but you know what? At the end of the day, to have a car like this for just over 10,000 US, I'm okay with that. Once I do sell the engine, it will be $11,846.82, which converted to US freedom funds, $8,690.87. So, did we meet the budget? No, not quite, not currently. Will we hit the budget when I decide to find some free time and refresh an engine and sell it to a buddy? Yes, we will. And again, doesn't account for labor. Labor can end up being a small fortune on its own, but if you're able to do this and you have some time and you want to watch YouTube videos and learn how to do it yourself, by all means, this is something that I'm sure a lot of people could slowly work towards.
Even though technically this is the end of the build, and mechanically it is exactly as I wanted it to be, after driving it for a while, we did want it to handle a little bit better and to have a little bit of a nicer stance to it. So we did install some BC Racing coilovers so that it would handle and perform better. Afterwards, we did end up taking it to Marcel, which is the livery expert, to work his magic and to make the outside look and stand out as well as it does mechanically. We ended up adding a few additional touches here, and I think it looks pretty damn good. You guys ready to see it? The final result was an homage to the MotoGP 1M safety car. Marcel nailed it with the livery and completely exceeded my expectations. When it was completed, we did end up taking it to a few shows, and fortunately we did end up winning a few awards, which was definitely the icing on the cake. I'm definitely happy with how the build turned out, and we do have quite a few plans in the works for 2026. If you've stuck around this long and you haven't subscribed already, feel free to do so. And if you already have subscribed, I really do appreciate it. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you on the next one.